Okay, I think we've got a good chunk of people here right now, so we'll kick off and people can join in as we continue with the webinar regardless. So, as I said, you're all very welcome here this evening. My name is Ruth Doyle, and I work for a company called MCO, and we're managing the public engagement during this particular phase, which is the non-statutory, or sorry, the statutory consultation phase on the Cabinteely Greenway. So, you're all very welcome here this evening. There's a range of engagement activities that we're carrying out. We'll be moderating the webinar tonight, but we can talk a bit more about some other engagement activities towards the end of the session. The main aim of this session is that so you can understand a bit more about the Cabinteely Greenway, why it's being proposed, and the background to the project, along with hearing from the engineers about the route. So, the particular route design, we'll share some more drawings with you, and you'll be able to get a really good understanding of the project in order to make a submission to this statutory consultation, which is currently live until the 11th of December. So it's really for you to find out more, put your questions to the project team, and then you'll really have a good sense of what the project's about and be able to make a really decent submission to the consultation. So we're going to start with Mark Campbell, who is from Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council, and he is from the Active Travel Department, and he's going to give a bit of background to the project. Next, we'll go to Amy Dunn, who's from DBFL Consulting Engineers, and she's going to talk a bit about the features and just go into the detail along the specific sections of the route to give you a sense of the design. And then at the end, I'll talk about some of the consultation activities, but really the main thing is to allow time for questions. So we'll be probably about 20 minutes or so for the presentation at the start, and then another kind of 30 minutes for the Q&A session at the end. If you want to go to the next slide, Amy. So it is a webinar format. As I said, it is primarily about information and you trying to get a sense of the scheme and ask the questions you want to ask. So what we're going to use is the chat function. I'm sure you've all seen this before, but it is the speech bubble at the bottom at the bar of the screen there. So if you want to ask a question, you can do so during the presentation if some questions kind of spring to mind, but we'll be putting them all to the panelists, to Amy and Mark at the very end of the session. So after their presentations, we will have a Q&A session at that point, but we'll be gathering them and myself, I'll be managing the discussion. I'll make sure that we get to as many of those questions as possible. So the questions go straight through to the project team members. So they'll go to myself and Amy and Mark. And the other participants and as in the other people who are here now in this webinar won't see your questions. So the questions are anonymized. So you won't see what questions are kind of coming through from other people, but we will be seeing them all and we'll make sure to get through as many as possible. And then the last point is that this webinar is being recorded. As I said before, it'll be anonymous, so people won't see your names in this recording, but we're going to put it up online on the project webpage just as a resource for those who didn't manage to make it tonight or who want to find out more afterwards. So this will be going up as a kind of a YouTube recording on the Laoghaire-Rathdown website. So I'm going to hand over now to Mark, who, as I said, is from Laoghaire-Rathdown, and he is from the Active Travel Department, and he'll give you a bit of a background to the Greenway and why we're here now at this statutory consultation phase.
Thanks, Ruth, and good evening, everyone. So I suppose we'll start off with just giving an overview of what the Cabinteely Greenway is. So effectively, it aims to develop a safe, accessible, and attractive route for walking, wheeling, and cycling between Cornels Court and Cherrywood. It'll consist of approximately 2.3 kilometres of segregated, high-quality greenway infrastructure, enhancing connections for the local community to nearby schools, facilities, public transport, employment centres, and green spaces. So in terms of the route itself, so it's broken up into four distinct sections, commencing at the Cornels Court Hill Road, Old Bray Road junction, and it proceeds south to where it links in with Section B, Glenlawn Drive. It runs along Glenlawn Drive, and then when it comes up to the park, we're proposing a new entrance into the park. So it keeps a steady flow through from Glenlawn Drive into the park itself. When it hits the park in Section C, it will follow effectively the existing footpath where possible, so it has minimised the amount of impact on the park itself. But it also includes the link back out to the N11 through Clonkeen Road. And when it leaves Cabinteely Park, it crosses over Brennistown Road, and that brings us on to the final section, Section D, Brennistown, where it'll run south of Carrickglen and connect into Cherrywood Green Networks, or the Cherrywood SDZ. So in terms of benefits, so what are the benefits? Well, it'll improve walking and cycling connections between Cornels Court and Cherrywood. It'll bring safer local journeys for people of all ages and abilities, especially near schools, but all the retail and commercial units as well. It'll reduce car dependency and support for climate action targets. So obviously we're really trying to get people, it gives them options to either walk or to cycle to where they need to get to, which obviously helps in terms of getting cars off the road and reduces congestion on the road network at the moment. It'll enhance accessibility to public transport, improve access to green spaces and nature. It'll provide segregated walking and cycling routes, which obviously brings in safety. And then it's important to note, I suppose, there will be no existing lanes of traffic or parking that will be impacted as a result of this proposed development. So why is the scheme needed? Well, it's been identified that there is a lack of safe, accessible crossing points for pedestrians and cyclists along the route. It has poor connectivity for pedestrians or cyclists wishing to travel from Cornels Court through to Cabinteely Park and onto the wider Cherrywood area. And the provision for those travelling on foot through these areas is disjointed, while I suppose for cyclists it's effectively non-existent. So in terms of the local and national policies, they call for a creation of safe network and active travel facilities so people can choose to walk or cycle for everyday journeys. So why was this particular route chosen? Well, it forms a really important strategic link in both the Laoghaire-Rathdown cycle network plan, but also the Greater Dublin Area Cycle Network Plan. During, I suppose, the whole process, alternative routes were considered, but they were discounted for several reasons. One of them being this space is too tight to accommodate safe cycle facilities on Old Bray Road without having any significant impact on traffic movements. I don't know if anybody has tried to cycle down the Old Bray Road. For sections of it, it's fine, but there definitely is pinch points which are challenging enough, especially for experienced cyclists. The N11 is highly trafficked, high-speed road environment and likely to intimidate and deter younger or less confident cyclists. And finally, the proposed Greenway provides a safer, quieter and more pleasant option with minimal impacts on traffic. So there was a previous consultation which led on before this between November 23 and July 24. And it was really just to seek out feedback from the key stakeholders on what people wanted to see and probably more importantly, what they didn't want to see. And several of those items, key items there are listed below, which is the retention of separate turning lanes at Cornels Court Hill Road, Old Bray Road Junction to minimise any traffic impacts. So there will be no modal filter proposed on Glen Lawn Drive. In other words, it'll be two-way traffic and that will be retained. There'll be no impacts to current on-street parking, and additional safe crossing facilities are added at crucial points along the route, including Glen Lawn Drive and Brennistown Road. So the connection from the Greenway out to the N11 has been provided along Clonkeen Road, and an ecological impact assessment has been undertaken, informing route alignment, lighting design, and construction planning to minimise impacts on flora, fauna, and waterways. And finally, I suppose the feedback regarding safety concerns along Brennistown Road has been incorporated with measures to reduce traffic speeds in vicinity of the proposed crossing point. So in terms of the overview, the route overview, I've pretty much gone through it before, but look, I will run through it again. In terms of it's broken into four. We have Section A, which is the Cornels Court Hill Road to Glen Lawn Drive. Section B, which is from Glen Lawn Drive to Cabinteely Park. Section C is the Cabinteely Park, but it also includes the connection to the N11 via Clonkeen Road. And then finally, it's Section D, which is Brennistown Road to Cherrywood Green Routes Network. And that sort of sums up exactly what the route is going to be doing. So I'll pass you over to Amy Dunn, who will just go through the route in a bit more detail.
Thanks, Mark. I'll just start off. Good evening, everybody. I'll just start off with showing the animation that we've prepared for the scheme, which will hopefully bring it to life a little bit more. Okay, so I'll just take you through some of the main features of each of the sections, which you've just seen in the animation there. So starting back up at section A, at the Cornels Court Hill Road, Albury Road junction, the crossings there for the pedestrians and cyclists will be upgraded just to enhance the connectivity to the proposed route. There'll be no impact in terms of traffic flow, and the existing permitted turning movements will remain as they are currently at that signalised junction. The route will then comprise a 4-metre wide shared path on the eastern side of Cornels Court Hill Road. The existing southbound bus stop will be retained. There's also a controlled crossing proposed on Cornels Court Hill Road that'll be located just to the north of the Kerrymount Green junction. The route continues then down towards Glenlawn Drive. It narrows at over a very short distance, just down to 3 metres, and that's to avoid impacting an existing large mature tree there, but then it widens back out to 4 metres. And then into section B, Glenlawn Drive. So the route here will be a 4-metre wide shared path for walking and cycling along the southern side of Glenlawn Drive. As mentioned before, two-way traffic will be maintained on Glenlawn Drive. There's no change to the existing carriageway or access in and out of properties. That will remain as it is currently. There'll be a new raised zebra crossing on Glenlawn Drive to facilitate safe crossing movements. Down at the junction with Glenlawn Drive and Glen Drive, the roundabout will be reconfigured so that there's raised crossings on each of the arms. The geometry of the junction will also be tightened up, and that's to help to slow down traffic as it passes through the junction and to improve the safety of people that are crossing. And also it'll provide a safe direct link into Cabinteely Park. Within the Cabinteely Park section then, so the route through the park will be a segregated route, which will comprise a 2-metre wide footpath and a 3-metre wide two-way segregated cycle track. And this is in recognition that there will be a higher volume of users using the section of the route through the park. The current entrance on Glen Drive will be closed, and there will be 2 new entrances created. The one that I mentioned previously up beside the Glenlawn Drive roundabout, and there will also be a second new entrance created at the Albury Road junction. And these will better cater for the desired lines of pedestrians and cyclists that will be using the route. The park will remain closed at night time. Plans also include for new tree planting and biodiversity friendly landscaping and public space enhancements along its length. There will be new lighting within the park along the route, and that's to facilitate people that want to travel home, walk and cycle home and use the route, particularly on evenings like tonight when it's darker that bit earlier. But as I mentioned before, the park will be closed at 10 p.m. And when it's closed, the lighting will be switched off so that it minimises any potential environmental impacts. There'll also be a new connection out to the N11, which will be via Clonkeen Road. And this will be via a shared street whereby cyclists can safely mix on road with vehicles due to low traffic volumes and low vehicle speeds. But there'll be no change to existing on-street parking arrangements or access arrangements for the residents along Clonkeen Road. And section D then, Brennanstown Road. So there'll be a new entrance into the park created from Brennanstown Road. Where the route crosses over Brennanstown Road, there'll be a new zebra crossing. There'll also be a 1-lane, 2-way shuttle system for traffic. This will essentially be a give-take arrangement whereby the northbound traffic that's heading in towards Cabinteely Village has to give way to any people that are crossing over the zebra crossing, and also give way to any southbound traffic before they proceed through the shuttle. The route then continues as a 3-metre shared path through the woodland area. And then once we're past the woodland area, it widens back out to 4 metres. There's a new zebra crossing proposed over Brennanstown Avenue, and then the route continues on. It crosses over Cabinteely Stream via a new bridge, and it'll connect into the wider Cherrywood Green Routes network. And so just briefly, in terms of the overall design process that's brought us up to now, back at the start, we investigated and looked at multiple different design options in terms of route alignments, different types of treatments for junctions, crossing types and crossing locations, and different kinds of interventions in terms of public realm. There were various technical and environmental studies that were undertaken, which also informs the design. The feedback from the residents and stakeholders that was carried out during the pre-design and the preliminary design engagement activities was also fed into the design options development. We then undertook a multi-criteria analysis to determine the preferred layout for each of the sections. And then ultimately we refined the layout in terms of safety, accessibility and sustainability into the plan that's presented here now. So I'll hand back over to Ruth just to take you through the part 8.
Thanks a million, Amy. So, as I mentioned at the start, we're currently in the middle of the statutory consultation on this project, and it's been live from 30th of October, and it'll be open for submissions until the 11th of December. So, just over 3 weeks' time left to make a submission. So, the main ways to make a submission is online on Dún Laoghaire Citizen Space website. There's a specific consultation portal set up for the Cabinteely Greenway. There's a survey there with a couple of questions for you to answer to express your sentiment or raise any ideas or issues. So that is online. There is also a Dropbox in Cabinteely Library for anyone who wants to submit a hard copy submission. And also it's possible to post submissions to the Active Travel Department, and we'll post those that address into the chat there now so anyone can see it, and also the link to the Citizen Space survey. So we've also, just to kind of raise awareness about the project within the area, leaflets have been delivered to 16,000 premises within the hinterland of the project. We have gone and done a walkabout within the area. So within Glenlawn Drive and the surrounds there, Cabinteely Village, Carriglen, etc., just to kind of speak to various residents on their door. So kind of knocking on the door, and had a number of conversations with residents that way, just to explain that the project consultation is open, and to discuss some of their concerns with them or some of their suggestions. We have a drop-in information event, and that is on the 25th of November. So that's next week. That's in St. Bridget's Girls' School. And so anyone can come along to that from 4 to 8 p.m. and talk to and meet the project team there at that particular event. We have online, there's a project page online on Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown website with all the various kind of documentation and supporting materials and reports there, and environmental reports, background, technical drawings. I know some people were wondering where that information resides. I'll get my colleague Afric can post a link to that now, so you know where to go for further information. We've put out various social media posts through Dún Laoghaire-Rathdown County Council's social media channels, which would be Facebook and Twitter. We sent various mails out to PPNs and community groups, and we've offered meetings for some more kind of local stakeholders within the area, including residents associations, sports clubs, and have also reached out to the disability consultation group within DLR. So those are the kind of range of activities. As I said, we encourage everyone who's here today to spread word and to make a submission. It's open until 11th of December. Then we'll be evaluating the kind of feedback that comes through from the consultation, and that will go into a Part 8 Chief Executive report, which will go to the councillors to kind of to vote and whatever way they think the project should go ahead at that particular point. That'll be in Q1 next year. So I don't know, we're going to go to questions now, but Mark, is there anything else you kind of want to say about the kind of the end of the process here? Like, it is a Part 8 planning process. You might just want to kind of mention what that involves at this point.
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose effectively we wait through the whole consultation period. We get the feedback from everybody, and then there's a chief executive report which is pulled together, which encompasses all the feedback we've received and the commentary that we've received as well. So that all feeds back into the Chief Executive report. And then that is passed over to the elected members or the councillors, who then, I suppose, they review and they make a decision on whether they feel that they want to approve the scheme or whether they want to approve the scheme with amendments or whether they don't want the scheme at all. So that's effectively what the process entails. And it brings it from then, depending on what the outcome is, it would proceed onto detailed design stage.
Okay, and we've got a range of questions to go through now, but just while we're on that, then while we're talking about kind of timelines and stages, there is a question on when would construction start? You know, if there's a decision then by councillors, what would the timeline be there?
Yeah, realistically, if, as I say, if subject to the decision of the councillors, realistically, you would be looking at 2027 before any construction would commence, in terms of
Okay.
the route itself.
Okay, and we'll stick with some of those kind of planning questions now. Then there's a question on the part eight. Is it an all or nothing? Is the way the person has phrased this? Is it an all or nothing part eight process project, or can components be chosen?
Yeah, no, as I mentioned before, so it goes to review by the elected members, and they can choose to approve it and accept it as it currently stands, or they may accept it and approve it with amendments to the scheme. So they might feel that there's aspects to it that they feel that needs to be changed, and that could be on the basis of some of the reports, effectively the Chief Executive report, or they will say, no, we don't want to see this happening. So those are the three outcomes that we could get from this process.
Okay, Mark, and a question around funding. Who is funding? You know, is there a budget available for the construction works?
Yeah, so it's been funded at the moment by the NTA. So every time we come to a different stage of the process, it goes through, I suppose, an NTA review. They will look at where we are, what we're trying to achieve. But I suppose commitments in terms of the overall project, they've reviewed it and the NTA are supporting it. And at the moment, it's being funded by the NTA.
Okay, that's great, Mark. Thank you for that. We might move on to some more kind of specific questions about the scheme design, and there are a couple of questions here. I'll go to some questions related to Glenlawn Drive next. So there's a query on whether or not the width of Glenlawn Drive roadway will remain unchanged.
No,
Amy, do you want to take
yeah,
that? Yeah.
there's no change to the existing width of the carriageway along Glenlawn Drive. That remains as it is
Okay.
currently. The path would run on the southern side of the existing carriageway, so no change to the width. Two-way traffic is maintained. Access remains as it is currently.
Okay, and then so you're saying the two-way traffic will remain. Then there's a question kind of related to that around the modal filter, which I think was posed in an earlier design, and someone's wondering, because there is no modal filter there, does that mean there will be no traffic reduction within Glenlawn Drive?
Yeah, so we had proposed the modal filter previously just in response to some previous feedback we got around the speeds along Glenlawn Drive, and some people wanted to just see that reduced. And it was another option in terms of looking at maybe having an on-road facility, and that would have reduced the volume of through movements along Glenlawn Drive. But by having the separate segregated off-road facility, we don't need to reduce traffic volumes. I mean, they're pretty low along there as it is at the moment. We've introduced the raised crossings both at the western end of the Glenlawn Drive that connects up to Cornell's Court Hill Road, and also the raised crossings and the reconfiguration of the junction at the other end of Glenlawn Drive. So that will all help to reduce traffic speeds that are entering that area.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Amy. And you did kind of clarify there about the positioning of the bike lane, that it's posed for the green area. Just to clarify that once
It
more.
is, yeah, and there'll be about a 2 metre buffer between, say, the curb edge of the carriageway and the path. And so within that buffer, that'll keep the existing public lighting columns, but we're also proposing some new tree planting and other planting along that strip there as well.
Okay, perfect. And then just you did mention, the roundabout there and, zebra crossings and some kind of traffic calming related to that roundabout. There was a query on whether or not that would cause congestion, um, the addition of.
No, no, the volumes are very low as it is currently. It's really just to slow traffic that's passing through that junction. At the minute, there's nothing there that slows motorists from as they're passing through at the minute, and that makes it quite unsafe for pedestrians as they try to cross. And again, in response to the feedback that we received, this is a measure to try and enhance the safety of that junction for all users.
Okay, thanks, Amy. We'll move on to a few questions on Cabinteely Park. And I know it was addressed during the presentation, but maybe it's worth going back over that. And Mark, you might take this around the opening hours, and whether or not those gates would remain open and what time they close at. And does that change? Is that in line with broader kind of closing time for the park?
Yeah, what has been proposed is that the park will be closed at night, but what we will do is we will follow the summertime opening hours. So the idea is that it will shut at 10 o'clock in the evening and open again at 6 o'clock in the morning. And the idea of that is that people who are trying to get home from, let's say, work or from university or college, the vast majority of the commuters or people that are using this will have used it by 10 o'clock. We don't anticipate huge volumes of people using it beyond that. But it also frees up, I suppose, in terms of the lighting we're proposing to go through the park, that will be switched off. And that works from a biodiversity perspective. So any nocturnal mammals that are currently using it, it won't have huge impacts on them. So I suppose it's getting that balance between safety for the users, but also the users of the park, but also for the mammals and biodiversity.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We'll go to some questions around safety next, really, which is kind of, wondering about. Are there any risks around speed of, say, e-bikes or e-scooters using the bike lanes or maybe interacting with pedestrians? Amy, do you want to take that in the first instance?
Yeah, so we have introduced some design features at key points where there's potential conflict areas. So chicanes just to slow down cyclists as they approach those points. I guess in general though, there are legal restrictions around the speeds of e-bikes and scooters that keep them restricted, and by and large, the users are quite considerate and respectful of other users on these facilities. The width of the facilities as well is in accordance with standards, so it gives plenty of space for e-bike users or scooters to navigate around pedestrians as they move along the route. Um, Look, that's notwithstanding that there are a small number and a small cohort that flout the rules, but it's not the majority. It's very much a small number of people, and that we've introduced enough measures into the design of the scheme to try and minimise those risks.
Okay, thanks very much, Amy. So there's a few questions around, biodiversity related to the scheme. There is one question around bulbs, and that there are bulbs, daffodil bulbs, etc., that already exist along Glenlawn Drive, and will those be affected? Will there be any other planting? Mark, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, yeah, there is. There's a belt of bulbs running all the way down Glenlawn Drive. Unfortunately, yeah, the likelihood is they will be impacted, but the landscape architectural design that has been put in place has considerably increased the amount of bulb planting that will take place all the way down through the route. So for 2.3 kilometers, we're going to have increased amount of bulb planting through it, as well as tree planting and native hedge planting where possible and where feasible. So, I mean, of course, there's going to be a few things lost in terms of the bulbs, but by and large, we're getting a huge gain in terms of the landscape input, both for the park and for the surrounding areas.
Okay, and then Mark, then trees in general. There's one person here that wonders about, particularly in section D, whether or not there will be any trees cut down there. So you might just kind of clarify that and just talk generally about any impact on trees.
Yeah, I mean, there will be trees lost. It's not something that we try to avoid wherever possible. We've minimized it by having an arborist on board. The arborist has given us, I suppose, guidance in terms of the best locations to reroute the proposed greenways. So where it does pass through trees, we've identified locations where the trees are of poor quality. So I think it's as high as 70 or 80% of the trees that will be lost will be category C or category U. That means either they're going to have to be taken away anyway, because their condition is poor, or that they are of poor quality with less than 10 years expected lifespan. So it's really been I suppose, a combined effort in terms of taking the arborist perspective on board. And with that said, there's over 135 trees that are going to be planted along the scheme as well. So there's a huge gain in terms of the tree canopy cover that's going to be gained for the park and the surrounding areas.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And then a related question around, maintenance of any new planting or indeed some of the kind of grass in and around the bike lanes, for example, on Glenlawn Drive, would there be, what's the
Yeah,
plan
so
there?
in terms of maintenance, parks they're aware obviously of this scheme. So certain areas along Glenron Drive will be maintained the way it currently is being maintained. Where it goes into the park, we pretty much have amenity grass, which has been mown anyway. But where we have, let's say, meadow, or we've got, I suppose, grass that's growing a little higher than normal, there'll be at least a meter that will be mown. So we don't have any vegetation coming out across the greenway itself. But by and large, there'll be no real difference to the maintenance regime of the landscape as it currently stands.
Okay, Mark. So we'll move on to some questions now around kind of the positioning of the Greenway and what other kind of networks it connects into. So there's a query here around, wondering whether or not it's dangerous ending the Greenway on Cornels Court Road. You might just talk a little bit about those interactions, Amy, maybe, or I don't know, Mark, if you're whichever.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
taking that one. Yeah, so it does terminate at the junction at the top of Cornels Court Hill Road. It doesn't extend into the village. There would have to be a separate scheme at a later date to continue it on through the village. And it wasn't included as part of this scheme because a route or interventions in the village is quite a big job in itself and would require further engagement with residents and the businesses along there. And ideally, it should be done in tandem with maybe a village enhancement scheme as well, to have the two integrated. So that was the rationale behind commencing the scheme at the junction there.
Okay, thanks, Amy. There's a question here on the two-way shuttle system that's posed at Carglen. Could you explain that a little bit more, just how that would work, Amy, just the operations of that?
Sure, yeah. So over that short, it's about 15 to 20 meters, it would reduce down to one lane. And the traffic that is, say, heading northbound, so that's traffic that would be heading towards Cabinteely Village, they would have to stop and wait for any cars that would be passing through the shuttle system, so coming south out from the village, before they proceed on and pass through the shuttle. So it maintains the two-way flow of traffic. It just will slow traffic down because they'll have to stop and give way to anything that's already passing through the shuttle, or give way to pedestrians and cyclists that are crossing over the route at that point. And the reason that we've gone for that particular arrangement is because it does slow traffic down. Speed is an issue along Brennanstown Road, so this is one measure that will help to address that, but also it provides for that safe crossing facility for the users along the route, and it also provides opportunities to widen the footpath along that particular section. At the minute it's quite narrow at that point, so there's a number of benefits to the particular arrangement proposed.
Okay, thanks, Amy. There's a couple more questions about the route and wondering, is there a way that it can connect up to the schools, namely, St. Bridget's boys and girls schools?
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of the route itself, it does bring. So if we take St. Bridget's Boys' School, the route has provided a crossing point across Cornels Court Hill Road, and it links it up to Kermount Green. But once we get to Kermount Green, it is effectively a residential set of streets there. So they're relatively low volume. I'm sure, Amy, you, at any point you can jump in here, but they're relatively low volume and low speeds. So it's considered relatively safe streets for children to be cycling on. And likewise, when you go to St. Bridget's Girls' School, so the whole idea is that the Greenway will get you safely into the park. And it's something that people need to remember, that the Greenway is not just about cycling, it's about walking as well. So it gets you into the park and it gives you a very safe access up into the St. Bridget's Girls' School there too.
Okay, Mark, and just a question on, the N11 cycle route and why that's been dismissed or why that can't be used as an
Yeah,
alternative.
yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic cycling piece of cycling infrastructure there. It's great, and it's great for commuters and people who are really confident about their cycling. And I cycle it quite a bit myself, in particular now that we're doing this particular project. But it's definitely not the type of cycle infrastructure we need for quite a lot of our community. So for children or elderly, people who are just not overly confident about cycling along a really, really busy and sometimes unwelcoming sort of environment for a cyclist. So it just doesn't cater for trying to encourage people to get onto their bikes or to walk for those local trips that they need to take.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Um, there's just a question here on the bridge from the new builds on the Doyle's nursery site and how that will be navigated.
Yeah, so the that bridge has recently gone in, and we've been looking at how the proposed route will tie into that. So there'll be a slight gradual ramped arrangement just to bring the level of the greenway up to gradually rise up and meet it and tie into it on both sides of the route. So um, it doesn't change the alignment that we've shown. We will tie into that bridge arrangement, and like that it'll provide a connection into the new development that will be going in there.
Okay, thanks very much, Amy.
Just to add on to that as well, I think one of the comments that I saw coming through is the fact that the oak trees along that particular route, um, yeah, the ramp up to the bridge will avoid the oak trees. I think there's four in total along that particular route that you're talking about. They're a huge asset to the greenways, so we're doing all our best to keep them for sure. Yeah, there'd be no damage to them at all.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Just the question on the GAA pitch. You might talk a bit about interactions there and people wondering whether or not the entrance to the GAA pitch might be affected.
Yeah, so in terms of the J pitch, so we have the route actually gets across the Willow Grove. So along Bray Road, there's a turning off into Willow Grove, which is effectively 8 or 9 meters down from the GA pitch or the rugby pitch that's there at the moment, Geraldine P. Moran's. Um, yeah, I mean, it hasn't been incorporated into this particular scheme, but there's no reason why it can't be considered. It can't be considered by the elected members as something that could be added in. It's a very short distance. It's 8 meters, 10 meters max. So it would be great facilities to get children to the GA pitch as well. Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, thanks. Question on Kerrymount, wondering if that's safe to walk and cycle on without a greenway, why does it need to go on Glenrun Drive?
So there is a connection that will be facilitated to and from the Greenway from Kerrymount Green. So as Mark mentioned before, it is a relatively quietly trafficked route along Kerrymount Green, and would ultimately as well facilitate the connection onto the boys' school. It's not been incorporated within the current scheme extents though.
Okay, thanks, Amy. We've gotten through, I think, most kind of questions. There's another one here actually, which is about whether how it ties in with other projects like Bray Road. Mark, do you want to take that?
Yeah, well, I suppose in terms of the Greenway, if you look at the overall and the wider network, cycle network for Dún Laoghaire, I suppose the ultimate gain or the ultimate aim is really to get that to link in to what's going on down in terms of along the Brave Road and then across onto Shank Hill, where it'll meet up to the coast. So effectively, what we'll have is we'll have a link that will go from Cornels Court all the way through Cabinteely and meet up with the coast along Shankill. So and it'll be connecting with all the routes that have been either there that they're there at the moment or that are will be provided over the next number of years. So I suppose it's looking at the bigger picture of how it links in, and I think that's the same thing in terms of linking in with the Kilboggart Park provision of cycle routes there as well.
Okay, and there was one specific question that we didn't get to on Glenlawn Drive, and it was the footpaths. Like, will the footpaths be fully, resurfaced, and will the road be resurfaced at all on Glenlawn Drive as part of those works?
At the moment, the interventions are focused primarily on the provision of the new path along the southern side, and where there's the connections or the tie-ins into the existing footpaths or junctions on the other side. Those localized areas would be upgraded or resurfaced just to facilitate the tie-ins. But there's no whole-scale resurfacing proposed along Glenlawn Drive as it is currently.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And this is a question, it might be just be that it's beyond the scope of the scheme, but people are asking about the gatehouse at the entrance to Cabinteely Park, and would that be upgraded?
Yeah, no,
Part of it.
it is beyond the scope of the project. However, there is a sports pavilion which has been granted as Part 8 alongside the gatehouse or the gate lodge that's there at the moment. And as part of that, at least superficially, from my understanding, is that the external ends of the lodge will be upgraded along with the sports pavilion. Um, and I'm sure they have something else in mind in terms of its future use as well, but it won't be a part of this particular project.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm scrolling through some more of the kind of questions here. I mean, yeah, there's a question obviously on the environmental impact study, but that should be online, Mark, with the documentation.
Absolutely, yeah. Everything's online in terms of the
Yeah.
reports. So the
Yeah.
EIA and the EIAR is all there and
Yeah.
ECI.
And then subsequently, like there's a question about the chief executive's report, and that's the part eight chief executive's report, and will that be made available? And yes, that is something I know certainly that would be put online.
Absolutely, yeah. That's all made available for anybody to look at. Once it's been reviewed by the elected members.
Yeah, exactly. And people can listen into the elected member discussion as well if they so wish. I know that that is also a kind of a live recording, so that will be made, that is available. So, okay, there's someone saying they want a very specific construction start date. Would it be spring or autumn? But I think the best you're saying there would be the following, not next year, Mark, but the year after.
Yeah, I realistically it'll be 2027 if subject to obviously getting approval. It would be 2027, and look, ideally it would be in the spring. Quarter 1 is generally when you're trying to get starter projects, so we have a good clean run of it for the year. But there's no guarantee. There's so much can happen in between now and then.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think that there's just a couple more comments coming in. Again, I suppose people are just kind of concerned about the schools and are sort of calling for as much to be done as possible to make those journeys safe. But I think we've addressed that as best we can, but certainly put that in, those opinions into the submissions as well. We'll be evaluating the feedback through the submissions. Today really is kind of about the questions, but if you have those points to raise, do make any points that you've raised today again once more in your submissions. I'm going to get Afric to post the link to the Citizen Space page again so everyone has it. There's one more question coming in here. Um, how is it planned to continue Greenway at Coronel's Court Village in the future? Okay, I think that possibly what was answered. Do you want to kind of just go back? You were saying that about the separate scheme there, Amy.
Yeah, so we've started the route at the Cornels Court Hill Oldbury Road junction. It doesn't extend into the village at the moment because developing a scheme through the village is quite a substantial task in itself and would require extensive consultation with the businesses and the residents again through that area. And ideally, we'd be doing it in conjunction with like a village improvement scheme and public realm enhancements and things like that. So it would be quite a substantial piece of work to develop. And it's something that will have to be looked at in the future to provide that connection on from our proposed scheme through the village and up to the N11.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really valid point being made there, and we were obviously conscious of the fact that people would want to get right into the village there, but as Amy says, it is a huge amount of work, it needs to be addressed and tackled as a very separate piece of work, and real good consideration in terms of public realm and village improvement scheme would have to be put together on that. But absolutely great point. Yes, good point to be made.
Okay, thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone. We've gotten through most of the questions now, I believe, and Afric has posted again there the link to the citizen space. This will be recorded, and it'll be up online if anyone wants to go back over it. There's one last question that we'll squeeze in here, which is around the budget, if there are any kind of figures available on what the budget might be for construction, I guess.
Yeah, so the cost estimate as it stands is 4.7 million.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay, we're going to leave it at that. But look, thank you all so much for your questions and for participating this evening. Please make a submission online. You have until the 11th of December to make your submission to the statutory consultation. And yeah, thank you. Thanks once again, and spread the word with friends and family.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much,
Bye
everyone.
bye. Thanks.